Hello, you're watching DD India and I'm Preeti presenting this edition of Midday Prime, a show we get for you every afternoon to make sure that you keep yourself abreast with everything that should making it to the headlines. We get to national updates, we get to international updates, updates from the world of business, sports, enough to keep you engaged for the next 1 hour. The focus of the show today will be Prime Minister's US visit. First, we get to the big news of this hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on a 4-day visit to America. Prime Minister to interact with leading CEOs to highlight the economic opportunities in India, to hold bilateral meetings with Australian and Japanese counterparts, to also meet US Vice President Kamala Harris. Ahead of PM's interaction with the CEOs, US-India Business Council President Nisha Biswal speaks exclusively to DD India, says India can be a driver for global economic recovery and in boosting trade and commerce, highlights India's sustained and record FDI despite COVID pandemic. Team DD India brings all the action from ground zero in Washington, D.C. and in New York. Ahead of the 76th session of the UNGA, foreign ministers of G4 countries, India, Brazil, Germany and Japan meet in New York. Stress on the need for reform of the Security Council. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar addresses G20 on the situation in Afghanistan, also meets Australian counterpart. Prime Minister Modi to announce nationwide rollout of Pradhan Mantri Digital Health Mission on September 27th. Under this, a unique digital health ID will be provided to the people, which will contain all the health records of the person. Union Health Minister releases National Comprehensive Guidelines on Post-COVID Management, guidelines to help health workers prepare for post-COVID health complications in advance. BJP gears up for elections in Uttar Pradesh. New election panel appointed by the party holds a series of meetings. Union Minister Anurag Singh Thakur holds meeting with party leaders in Lucknow. And in sports, India's women's compound archery team beat hosts USA to win the gold at the World Championship. Men's team led by seasoned Abhishek Verma lose to Austria in the final to settle for a silver medal. All right, those were the top stories. Up next, before we get to details of Prime Minister's US visit, we'll take you live to the Conference on Digital India, a boost to economy. Now, this is being held through the virtual mode. We'll take you live there.
If that digital India, the digital part of this economy, will be at least $1 trillion or more. I want to speak about three things actually. First and foremost, our lessons from the pandemic itself, because digital had an important role to play during the pandemic. Second, I want to talk about the opportunities that digital technologies provide. It will transform every industry and will transform our life. And third, why India has a huge opportunity here. So let me come to the first point I want to make, which is our pandemic response. As you have all realized that this event itself is being recorded digitally. All of us are in different parts of the country and we're connecting using video conferencing products, a video conferencing facility. Now, before the pandemic, video conferencing was seen as an esoteric technology used very rarely by us on day-to-day interactions. But today, video conferencing technologies are playing an important role keeping families connected, children educated. Uh, you know, using telemedicine, we are able to connect to our doctors and physicians. Uh, Suffice to say, digital technologies is what is keeping us together, what is keeping businesses going, what is allowing the neighborhood kirana store to actually function and deliver goods to every home today. So, you one example of how digital has accelerated, the transition to digital has accelerated during the pandemic. In fact, I believe that what would have taken several months or several years got accelerated and compressed into maybe 5 6 months, starting from April of 2020. We quickly, very quickly, adopted to the new way of doing business, living, etc. Now, if we look back, the um, the foundations for this have been already laid through the various programs that the government had come up with, the telecom infrastructure that we had put up, um, and of course, the products that were introduced by the technology companies in the run up to the pandemic. And because of that, because of all these technologies, our life had some semblance of continuity. We had some semblance of being together and being connected. If this had happened probably 10 years back or 15 years back, we would be actually challenged to actually stay together and be together. Uh, the second lesson I want to take from the pandemic is how quickly the government responded and how quickly the IT services industry, which I belong to, responded during the pandemic. Within a span of a couple of weeks, the entire industry, 4.5 million, that is 45 lakh employees, transitioned to work from home. The government made sure that all the required permissions and regulatory changes were made in a very short period of time, such that work from home was possible. And and the pandemic actually reinforced the world's trust and dependence on India. So much so that the IT services industry actually grew during the pandemic. This is one of the few industries that grew during the pandemic, and the dependence on India, the dependence on Indian companies increased during the pandemic. No customer suffered. The world's trust increased during the pandemic. So again, this is a wonderful example of together how we can leveraging technology serve the world, how together we can respond quickly to an emergency, to a challenge. The third example I want to use from the pandemic is the COVID application itself. Today, I believe that India has probably one of the best vaccine programs in the world. Within a span of 24 hours, India vaccinated 2.5 crore people just about a week back, or 25 million people a week back. But minute by minute, we could actually know in which part of the country, in which location, who was being vaccinated. And at the end of the day, we could tally within a minute that 2.5 crore have been vaccinated, and we would of course know who has been vaccinated and who is not. So that is unprecedented. I believe this is again a system that is first of a kind. That just shows the way we and this COVID application was rolled out just during the pandemic. It was created during the pandemic and was rolled out in a very short span of time. So these three examples that I gave you now tells you the power of digital technology, how we have used it to respond, and how the lessons that I draw from this pandemic, if I may say so, the silver lining during the pandemic is the transition to digital and how we responded, taking advantage of digital technologies. Now, let me come to my second point, actually, which is about emerging technologies itself, actually. There are a slew of technologies that are in the anvil that are emerging. Now, I am, as some of the other panelists, are products of the third industrial revolution, the digital computing, the internet, the cloud computing revolution, actually. It allowed India to create a world-class industry, serving customers around the world, supporting them from India, and created a $200 billion industry, giving employment to 45 lakh people. I already talked about how the industry responded during the pandemic. Now, when you ride on a technology wave, which is the digital computing wave, and saw that there is an opportunity to develop software for the world, Indian industry responded, and we created a world-class industry in India. Now, if you look at the technologies that are emerging today, and these are as much or even more important, critical for the development of the world, and there are lots and lots of them. Robotics, AI, and machine learning. I believe AI and machine learning is again fundamental to how we would actually work, live in the future. The Internet of Things. Today we have about 7 billion connected devices on the internet. We will have 70 billion connected devices on the internet in the near future, that is in the next 10 years. The way healthcare is being provided today, we talked about telemedicine, but using wearable devices, any individual can be tracked continuously, monitored continuously, and even before the individual senses any discomfort, we can actually recognize that the person requires attention. So there is a slew of technologies, and on top of this, our ability to monitor, our ability to understand, our ability to sequence DNA, our ability to look at other vital parameters improves over time with the new technologies that are emerging. This wave of technologies, what are called the fourth industrial revolution related technologies, are going to transform our lives over the next 30, 40 years. I believe that the next 30, 40 years are going to be even more exciting than the last 30, 40 years. The last 30, 40 years, we have grown from a $600 billion economy to a $2.7 trillion economy. So 4 to 5 times growth in the last 25 years. I believe that in the next 25 years, again, we will grow at least 4 to 5 times, but probably closer to a $20 trillion economy. And India truly will be a developed economy, a middle income country where middle class become the majority, and this will be significantly transformational, and huge amount of wealth, huge number of jobs, huge number of new businesses will be created because of that. And now I come to the third point. Now you all have heard that India is one of the best places to do startups. In the last 8 months or so, we have had about 27 unicorns in the country, all built on a technology framework, a technology-led business model. And India, I believe, will have more than 100 unicorns. That is, businesses with market cap of $1 billion or more in the next probably 2 years. Why is this happening? Because India is a large market with about 1.4 billion consumers. India has very little of legacy, so we can actually reimagine and create new solutions for this country. I believe that we can reimagine healthcare, we can reimagine education. We have already reimagined our financial services industry. We have one of the best architectures for the financial services industry in the world today. And the unique model that India provides to the world is an inclusive model of development where every citizen can participate, an affordable, inclusive model of development. And this, I think, is very, very important if we consider the 7 billion people in the world. You know, the model of the 20th century, what we have seen till now, is a model where uh, the top 10% of the population gets good service and the remaining 90% of the population may not get the service. Whereas India's model, you know, if you look at the financial services sector itself, built on UPI, Aadhaar, etc., clearly is an inclusive model, an affordable model, a low-cost model where everybody can participate and the transaction costs are actually significantly lower when you look at when you look at you know, how we have managed this transition. And I have no doubt that you know, the the promise or our desire to become a 5 or a $10 trillion economy will be built on top of a digital infrastructure, a digital technology-based economy, a digital India. And that's why, this session and our discussion today is going to be very, very important. CI has been working very closely with industry, with government, with our partners in academia, research, etc., with our global partners to shape India's development journey. In the if you look at the history of CII, the quality movement was pioneered by CII, and similarly, CII is also working very closely on digital transformation in the country as well as on the startup side. So with this, I'm going to now request Sri Ajay Sahni, Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, to give his perspective and the government's role in boosting the Digital India program. So, sir, please, may I request you to deliver the keynote address. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. A very good afternoon to Shri Chris Gopalakrishnan ji, Shri Vijay Thadani ji, Rajan Navani ji, Dilip Sahni, and Dr. Rishi Bhatnagar ji, and others who have joined this conference. It's wonderful to be having this program, and Christy has covered, I think, so beautifully brought us to, what all has happened during the pandemic, and what are all the challenges and opportunities that we have ahead of us. I think it's a wonderful time to be in India today and in business in India. For several decades, I think what we have been able to accomplish and what we have been able to leverage in India has been sheer availability of talented human resource. In fact, we like to characterize India as a talent nation. If there's another country that calls itself a startup nation, not that we are not a startup nation, but I think it's in terms of talent that we are truly unbeatable. Leveraging Indian talent, we have companies that have grown into huge size and scale, including the company that Chris was himself involved in founding, that serve marquee clients from the Fortune 500 across the globe. And the resilience and strength of this was seen during the pandemic, where services provided by the Indian ITES industry continued with hardly any tremor, with hardly any setback, in spite of having to go through a situation where 98%, 97 to 98% of the people were working from home. They were unable to come to the office. In spite of that, the strength of our IT industry was visible and in fact kept everyone running, not just India, but everyone across the globe running. I think that's a huge strength that we have and that we have to build upon. Another strength that we are seeing taking fabulous shape, again around talent, is the success of global captive centers, global competency centers, the R&D centers of some of the finest technology companies from across the world. I believe that there's hardly any major tech company that does not have today a global competency center or a global center, R&D center stationed in Hyderabad. In Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Pune, Noida, Gurgaon, and a number of other cities. This has grown even faster than the overall footprint of our IT and ITS operations. In the past few years, this has been a very significant development, that the R&D presence of major technology companies from across the world in India has grown even faster than the overall IT industry in India. The IT industry is slowly but surely moving towards software products. Products is a longer gestation game. Far more investment goes into it, and it's far, far more rewarding when you encounter success. We are seeing a very large number of startups that today are focused on software products and not just on software services. Another strength that we have been able to add in the past few years, and I would say, from around 2010 to 12 was a low point in our journey in electronic manufacturing. Since then, we have again revived activity, again built momentum. Between 2014-15 and 2019-20, we were able to grow electronic manufacturing in India from $29 billion to $76 billion in 5 years flat. This was at a compounded CAGR of 23%, growing year on year at 23% per year for 5 years flat. The pandemic did cause an impact, but we did not go down much. In spite of factories having to be closed, we are still at $76 billion even now. But the plans that have emerged, the confidence that has re-emerged, the investments that are on the anvil and are already happening, give us the confidence that the next 5 years could beat the 5 years of 23% CAGR growth. In fact, we have set our eyes on moving from $76 billion to $250 billion in a period of 5 years, moving at a clip of 27% CAGR on a much, much larger base. So for a long time, the refrain that we used to hear that, okay, in software we are good. What about hardware? What about electronics? I think we are becoming good at that as well. We are slowly but surely filling up that extraordinarily important part of our ecosystem. With scale comes completeness of the ecosystem. So as we build scale, we add to our ability to attract the sub-assemblies. We start with product assembly, we add sub-assemblies systematically, and then we move to components, and then we move to very core components like silicon fab or compound semiconductor fab or ATMP operations. But this is the journey that has started. There's a clear trajectory. And in the next couple of years, I think we should see it very visible and getting rolled out in a very clear and unmistakable manner. The third area that has been a sort of a, which is resulting in a truly Indian model almost on a global scale, is that of e-governance services, of the platforms that are taking shape. Chris has very nicely pointed to the CoWIN platform, which has taken shape in a very, very short time and gone on to build capability that could handle a load of 2.5 crore reasonably complex transactions. These are not just a momentary transaction, not just transaction of the vaccine being administered, but the data in a sense being born digital and resulting in a certificate almost instantaneously after the vaccine has been administered, and then being available in a comfortable digital form where one doesn't actually need to convert it into a paper format. These are not easy things when you deal with the scale of India. The Aadhaar platform has shown us what a national public digital platform can do. It is not just a database, it's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem where the magic happens not inside Aadhaar. The magic happens in the hands of banks. The magic happens in the hands of telecom operators who enroll subscribers. The magic happens in the hands of offices which use it for attendance monitoring. The magic happens in the hands of e-sign service providers who use it to provide a low-cost alternative to the earlier digital signatures which were on hardware tokens. Similarly, we have seen tremendous amount of success from UPI. Again, it's not magic which happens in the hands of banks. Magic happens in the hands of people who are using payment services provided by new age entities, and entities that we keep adding to because we have kept the entry barrier very low and conditions very clear and possible to comply with. So we have seen the growth of PhonePe, Google Pay, Paytm, Amazon Pay, and many more keep getting added almost month on month. This has been going on for about 4 years now. One would expect that this is going to slow down. How long can an exponential go on? Actually, Moore's law taught us that an exponential can go on for quite some time. But in case of UPI, it's wonderful to see just the past 3 months. In the past 3 months, in the month of June, we had 280 crore transactions on UPI with 5.47 lakh crore rupees being transacted. And there were 229 banks and their branches, of course, banks that were participants in this network. In July, we moved from 280 crore to 324 crore transactions. And from 5.47 lakh crore being transacted to 6.006 lakh crore in 1 month, 15% plus. In the month of August, one would expect, now that we have moved so fast, it's time to slow down. In the month of August, we moved from 6.06 lakh crore to 6.39 lakh crore, and the number of transactions moved to 355 crore transactions in a month on one platform. This is the magic that National Public Digital Platform is able to bring to the table. GEM, Government e-Marketplace, has lakhs of suppliers. It has an order book of more than 1 lakh crore. That is the kind of volume a new platform has been able to build in about 4 to 5 years of existence. GSTN, which sometimes one thinks of as a extremely complex thing, still encountering some teething troubles. So it's a very complex system. We have been able to replace disparate, different kinds of systems across the length and breadth of the country with one unified taxation system. And in some of the byproducts of that might actually be even more stupendous than the taxation element itself. Its ability to help lenders provide credit at competitive terms, digitally, online, instantaneously, to anyone who is in industry or in business. I think that itself might be a huge dividend that we will get from this kind of a system when it is combined with new age efforts like account aggregators. From CoWIN, we have also already seen FASTag makes it far easier for any vehicle to navigate the toll booths on national highways. And hopefully it will find similar traction on all the state highways and those toll booths that are there in that. Again, a rapidly growing ecosystem makes it possible for a vehicle to zoom through the toll plaza and not have to wait in a 500 meters queue. These are examples which have already taken shape in the very recent period. Umang is one app in which more than 1,200 services of central and state government are available to people on an app that we downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. And about 20,000 bill payment services. These 1,200 are other than bill payments. About 20,000 bill payment services, all of them available on one app. It's possible that this might take shape as a super app. DigiLocker, where crores of Indians are today registered as users, and about 350, 400, roughly coming closer to 400 crore documents have been published by various publishers. Not published on this, but they are accessible by using DigiLocker. One can go to one's educational mark sheets, educational certificates. More than 250 universities are now a part of DigiLocker. PAN card, Aadhaar card, driving license, vehicle registration, all kinds of new documents are coming onto a platform. These are huge platforms that will help us shape the future in this area. The National Digital Health Mission is going on right now. It started with a few union territories. Soon it will be rolled out nationally. A National Digital Education Mission is taking shape. The first artifact that you can see is diksha.gov.in, diksha.gov.in. Please check it out. See what is already available and what is likely to happen. Look at agriculture, which is giving shape to a national digital platform around agriculture. A consultation paper on that by name IDEA was already on the website of Ministry of Agriculture. Please do look at that. Similar work has started in logistics. It has started in knitting together, weaving together a criminal justice system with, on one side, courts, and on the other side, policing, forensics, prosecution, prisons. When you bring those together, the impact can be huge. With another carefully crafted dozen systems, I would say that the major domains can actually be woven together on a national scale. In each of these sectors, we have implemented a large number of projects. The projects are delivering what they were designed for. A project for soil health card delivers soil health cards. A project to help streamline the supply of fertilizers does that. A project to streamline land records does that. Something on seeds delivers that. But typically, the projects don't talk to each other. They were not designed for that. And projects are implemented not just by center, they are implemented by state governments, they are implemented by city governments. When we dream of a national public digital platform covering a sector or a domain, we bring these projects together, we harmonize across them, we find ways to understand what are the concerns, aspirations of all the stakeholders, and amalgamate all of these to cater to new age aspirations and make it a national ecosystem, not government to citizen ecosystem, where companies and startups can actually join in the same ecosystem, improve the services that are already available, add new services, innovate and bring problem solving into this arena. And by solving problems, grow completely new businesses applying all the new age technologies. As this happens, sector after sector, there is huge opportunity for the industry, for startups to join in these growing ecosystems. I would expect each of these ecosystems to rival the power of what Maruti Suzuki did 4 decades ago for India. 4 years hence, we have a massive automobile industry. It's that catalyst which actually brought us here. In early 80s, on one side, DOS and Windows actually came in 90s, early 90s. On the other side, Intel, called Wintel. That was a massive ecosystem that actually took shape. In the digital world, we have also seen Airbus take shape as an ecosystem. What is it that rivals such huge ideas, such huge ecosystems in the digital world? I would say that it is the national public digital platforms that India can build, and only India can build at a billion scale. No one else in the world can build these starting with a billion scale. Because if we build these successfully at a billion scale, there's only a 5x or a 6x required after that to cover the globe. This is the new opportunity which we must understand, we must embrace. The startup ecosystem has been a tremendous strength for all of us. To see unicorns emerge, 27 unicorns so far this year. 9 months are not yet over. In every 1.5 weeks, we have seen a unicorn pop up like in a popcorn machine. Or when you sprinkle seed in a fertile soil. Whichever model you take, no other ecosystem has the ability to grow unicorns with such certainty and such regularity. In each of our domain or sectoral ecosystems, we will definitely see dozens of unicorns take shape. At this point, there is one thing which is very important that we must reflect on. If we are aiming to reach $1 trillion digital economy, where does that $1 trillion come from? On one side, it comes from organic growth of the IT, ITES software product industry, the ICT, IT vertical. It comes from the continuing robust growth on the communications vertical, where broadband is yet to get to about 1/3 of India's population, even though we have done extremely well in reaching about 800 million people who are actually having access to broadband. It comes from digital payments and, from the financial sector. It comes from electronics manufacturing. But the most important area where it comes from is not just convergence of all the technologies, but the application of all the digital technologies to traditional sectors. It is the value add in agriculture, the value add in health, the value add in education, the value add in logistics, the value add in the justice dispensing systems, the value add in city living, the value add in rural areas and welfare programs. The value will come from what digital technology does to those sectors. And where will the value come from? The value will come from solving problems that are yet to be solved. And fortunately for us, there are a large number of problems yet to be solved. The moment, and Chris referred to this so beautifully, that as long as the top 2%, 5%, 10% people are getting certain services that the other 90% are not getting, there is a problem to solve. If they do not have access to the best eye care treatment, if they do not have access to the finest teachers in India and abroad, if they do not have access to the most convenient and low cost courier services or logistics services, there is a problem which is there to be solved. And there are large number of problems for us which are yet to be solved. And as long as we are continuing to solve the problems, there is immense opportunity to grow. And this is the opportunity that digital technologies must embrace. India is today the best placed in this arena. There are parts of the world which have maybe arguably better capability on the technology side, especially on some of the core ICT, core technologies, deep technologies. There are other parts of the globe which arguably have even more problems to solve. But the happy combination of having problems to solve, having the ability to solve those problems, having the talent to solve those problems, and an ecosystem that can support startups and companies in solving those problems. I think that's pride of place belongs to India. This cannot happen without the active participation and leadership of captains of industry. I'm really delighted that CII is taking it upon itself to look so closely at the opportunities and the issues, especially opportunities, challenges and opportunities that digital technologies bring, that Digital India brings to us. Very happy to be a part of this program today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Ajay Sani. It was really great to hear you talk about the breadth of opportunity, the model that India has adopted, which is, you talked about national public platforms and innovation and entrepreneurship. On top of that, you create the field and sow the seeds, and then 1,000 flowers bloom on top of that, right? That's the model that India has adopted, and how this can propel a transformation in society, how it can create new solutions, new opportunities, etc. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts in this regard, and showing us actually that uh, you know there is a strategy, there is a plan, and there is a way in which we can create this $1 trillion digital economy towards the $5 trillion overall economy that we want to create. Thank you very much, sir. I'm told that you need to go to another meeting, but our session now continues. I have my industry colleagues along with me, and I'm going to have a panel discussion with Mr. Vijay Thadani, Mr. Rajan Navani, Mr. Dilip Sahni, and Mr. Rishi Bhatnagar. And so what we will do is, I will ask certain aspects of what we discussed till now and get reaction from these industry leaders. So to start with, let me start with Mr. Vijay Adani. Vijay, you have been a veteran on this journey. You have been there as long as I am there, or maybe even before I was there, and you have seen the industry, the IT industry, grow from nothing to what it is today. You've also played a very important role. I know you're very passionate about talent, and so my first question to you is actually on the talent side. Now, in order to create a $1 trillion digital economy, we need to have a pipeline of talent. How do you see us address this issue? And this becomes extremely important because right now, we hear that attrition, especially with technology folks, is climbing. So, Vijay, your reaction. Vijay, are you on mute? You're on mute, sorry. So please unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the most important phrase of 2020. All right. So I'm saying, first of all, Chris, thank you very much. And also Mr. Ajay Sahni, thank you very much. I think your passion and enthusiasm, both of you, the way you express what the great opportunity that lies in front of us, having done what we have done, I think is extremely heartening. So the question is on talent. So we do talk about Digital India, and I think we all firmly believe that despite the fact that we call ourselves a talent nation, Digital India will remain incomplete without digitalized Indians, digital Indians, right? And digital Indians, I think, covers more than the 4.5 million people who are front-ending this in terms of building solutions. So let's describe the landscape a little bit. We have 2 or 3 types of people who are existing in this world. Those who were born digital, they are the people who are right now in their class 12 and are entering the college. They are born digital. They don't require any help with that. They are also called digital natives. And I would say the millennials, which was from early 80s till before that, till just before this, I would call them also digital natives, but digital natives who kind of lived in both sides. Not just the mobile economy, but also in the part of the desktop and the telephone systems and the internet economy. And then there are those who are digital immigrants. In fact, we are part of the digital immigrants community and got an opportunity actually to be one of the early adopters of digital. Now, we need when we are talking of talent, we need a mix of all these three together to be able to help us build the talent that we need. We need three types of talent. We need those who will actually solve the real technical problems. But those technical problems will, or technical solutions will then be adopted by those who are specialists in their domains. And those domains holders will need an appreciation of technology and an ability to use the technology in a form that it can produce results. Earlier, we could actually separate out information technology providers and users very easily. But now that that gap is fuzzy. Why? Because the users have to be power users. Reason is, in digital transformation, you are not just building a technology solution for a process, but you are actually creating a digital strategy for the organization, which is a marriage of strategy as well as the solution. So therefore, users will have to be much better trained than before. And then there are those who just need to be aware because they are in policy making, decision making position. So that's as far as adult is concerned. But if we go through the education journey, right from the school children will need less of changing a mindset. But those who have college or are working professionals also require a mindset change. And I think in the last 1 year, the real difference that has got made is that mindset change. We all had certain doubts about whether digital education is possible or education delivery in using digital technology is possible. I think that myth stands broken. The gap that we have fulfilled right now, or the gap that we have filled, is in having a better availability. I think the next scheme is to now focus on improving effectiveness. And in improving effectiveness, I think I come from a camp which strongly believes that the issue is to do with not pure digital, but a blended digital, which means the physical face-to-face will also have a role to play in addition to largely digital. And the second issue is learner centricity. Focusing on the learner and personalizing it for the learner, which is an opportunity which we have discovered using the digital infrastructure. So very much like businesses talk of market of one, I think in education we now talk of class of one. Instead of teaching a class of 60, I think you should be teaching a class of one. Why? Because different skills will be required. And each one will be a unique individual with a different skill. I think the national education policy, the new education policy which has come, that has come at a very appropriate time. So it is actually a very good confluence of Digital India infrastructure ready, a policy framework which is liberating and liberal in a form that it allows flexibility, it allows multidisciplinarity, it allows mobility. You know, the whole academic bank of credits, which will be implemented using digital technology, is a great idea. And therefore, we can create a talented workforce where each person has a unique set of talents and thus be able to realize the dream of $1 trillion economy. So $1 trillion economy is a long ride. If we have to really become a $1 trillion economy, we will need many, many more digitally equipped Indians than we have today. But I think the technology platforms that we have, the policy framework that we have, and the enthusiasm and passion that you have shared with us, I think will point us in that direction. I can talk more, but I'm sure there are others who would like to talk about it.
Vijay, thank you for talking about again a problem being converted into an opportunity, and us changing the paradigm to a personalized education model, classroom of one. Rajan, my question to you is about new opportunities, new areas for us to explore, because I think we need to look at massive opportunities that exist in the economy, new areas that have not been tapped into, to add to the revenue streams that we have, the growth opportunities that we have, and how is India placed, to look at things like entertainment, content, gaming, even things like leveraging social media for creating very really new platforms for commerce and things like that, and the whole area of non-fungible tokens. So many things are emerging at this point. And what is your take on these things, and how is India taking advantage of this, or what we should do in taking advantage of these, and how big this could be? That's it.
Thank you, Chris, very for that question, and it's really been a very enlightening session to hear you, as well as Mr. Ajay Soni on, so much that has happened in just the 6 years of Digital India, and I think the strong digital foundation that has really been laid out now gives us the opportunity to do so much more. So, as you rightly pointed out, Chris, I think the ability now to have the high-speed internet going into every household with 5G, with 1 billion users, two-way high data speeds, unlocks tremendous potential, especially when it comes to all the aspects that you talked of, when it, whether be it entertainment, be it gaming, be it esports, areas that I think India has the maximum opportunity when it comes to, unlocking that $1 trillion kind of economy that we talk of. Because, the large part of this drive and consumption is coming from the Gen Z, while Vijay was talking of the millennials and many others. I think the fact that 1 in 10 people in the world is an Indian under the age of 25 opens a direct, market access to that huge opportunity, who are, absolute digital natives, who are consuming content, in multiple ways, be it vernacular, be it, premium, be it Western, be it two-way interactive. The entire area of esports that we are seeing not only enables competition, amongst people. It's going to get you Olympic medals. There's pride to that. There is an opportunity to compete, to have two-way interaction, two-way entertainment. So many areas getting unlocked, particularly in these spaces, that is already happening. But I think also emerging technologies are shaping a lot of, the opportunities here. So when we look at, blockchain, and then, the cryptocurrency and the tokenization of things, now digital art being able to be not only monetized, but also being able to kept as a valuable asset, or as an asset class that will distinguish or be a part of a portfolio that includes, maybe real estate and equity, and, coming to those levels are all going to change the way, you look at value and value creation and wealth. I think, quantum computing is going to massively transform, mining, and the speed and the pace at which, things will move, because, the pace, the computing speeds will shoot up by, crazy amounts when it comes to the future. The analytics, AI, personalization, all, adding to the ability to therefore derive, personalized experiences is going to really shape a lot of the future. AR, VR, and we talk of mixed reality and extended reality is becoming so true today. I mean, how much of our time do we really spend in the real world vis-a-vis the virtual world? I think, what we're doing today, are we immersed in a real world, virtual world? How are we connecting? And I see that trend, really accelerating with the pandemic. And that's again been a big driver, across so many of our products, ecosystems. We see 40, 60, 80% growth, that has happened, which we would not have anticipated for another 3 or 4 years. So the acceleration of that, I think, has, caused, great excitement around so many of the opportunities, that will get unlocked. And, when we look at $1 trillion as a, economy, I think from an India perspective, there are 6 companies in the world that have a market cap of over $1 trillion. And interestingly, 5 of them are all tech companies, right? I mean, one company having a market cap of over $1 trillion, 5 of them being tech, and we all know the amount of Indianness that has gone into that, whether it's Indian talent, Indian leadership, Indian coding, so I think the time is absolutely right for us to see how India can create, product companies that can capture that large share of the global market. I mean, we talk of unicorns, coming out every day. Great. It's really taking us to a very strong, position. But, unicorn is not a destination. The ability for us to see how a country like India can have many more companies in the top 100 companies of the world. I mean, today we have 2, but that opportunity for a country that has 1/6 of the world's population is waiting for us to unfold. So, I would really say that the aspiration of a $1 trillion global, of a, digital economy, growing multifold from there, or accelerating substantially in the years thereafter is something that, is very exciting. So I think it's a long-term journey. It's got so many new areas that are going to shape up. And, for a country like India, like you rightly said, Chris, the innovation and the needs never end. While we move from industry 4.0 to say a society 5.0, and we look at what is the society going to need, and at an India level, we have so much of a catch up to do. And I think it is technology, it is digital, it is rapid transformation, that is going to be able to make all of that come true. And that, talks of disruption and talks of compressed timeframes and accelerated growth. So I think we are in for a very exciting decade. The 6 years of Digital India, that have laid the foundation, I think we'll now see, much higher growth in the next decade, as we address the issues and challenges of digital skilling, literacy, future of jobs, and new age things. So I'm truly excited about the opportunities that go across from food tech, fintech, health tech, edu tech, agri tech. You can add the word tech across every single, area, and there is an opportunity there. So very exciting times. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajan. A new age perspective, as well as the opportunity that exists across all industry sectors. Dilip, the question is to you next. Your company specializes in automation, in IoT, in the new capabilities that are bringing to transportation, etc. So on one side, we are talking about automation. On the other side, there is also concern about multiple concerns actually. Concerns about the security, concerns about jobs. But I believe that you have to actually think about the future and create the jobs of the 21st century. But I would like to get your perspective. How is India prepared to take on these challenges? How is India prepared to, take advantage of the opportunities that are provided by sensors, IoT devices? There's an explosive growth of connectivity and sensor-driven improvements that are possible, new opportunities, new businesses that are possible. So where do you come in, and what is your perspective on this?
Sure. So good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much, Chris, and just delighted to be a part of this this forum and this discussion. It's been such an enlightening session. To the point that you asked, and I want to build on the theme that you yourself said in the comments that others have made today, which is converting problems into opportunities, right? The times that we are living in, right? Let's just recognize this. There is a lot of challenge. There is a stiff headwind that as societies, as businesses, pandemic aside, even otherwise, there's just an enormous amount of challenge that we are encountering. And it suffices to say that the manner in which we have dealt with challenges in the past is not going to give us solutions for the future, right? I would just like to leave it at that. And like you said, where I'm coming from, industry, manufacturing oriented background, which is where all of this, the impact of industrial IoT sensorization is transforming and creating, a whole slew of new possibilities. I think in the context of what's going on here in India, uh, the traditional challenges that we've always had, around uh, relating to driving competitiveness, pushing productivity levels, and dealing with improving your efficiencies, eliminating qualities and defects, and all of that. Those challenges will stay, right? And I think year on year, the need for businesses and manufacturing entities to continue to improve, that is definitely going to be over there. It's not going to go away, right? But what we are now realizing is all of the new challenges that we are encountering, unprecedented supply chain, disruptions, the vagaries that come from over there. The world is just continuing to throw at us newer challenges, regulatory compliances. As consumers, our demands are becoming so aggressive that, it's placing an enormous burden on manufacturing companies, who have to continue to innovate much faster to keep the consumers happy. Better cars or better packaged foods, or we can continue talking on and on and on. And then on top of that, you don't even have to look too far. Just the times that we are living in, the sustainability related aspects are going to put an enormous amount of burden on organizations to drive their ESG agendas a lot more seriously, right? So that is the backdrop in which you have to drive the growth of your businesses, right? And that requires you to innovate, right? So I would say that is kind of like the context. And again, Chris, I'm coming more from a manufacturing and an industrial background. Now, if you have to sort of process all of this change that is happening around us, and if you put it in the context of India, where a vast number of manufacturers are MSME organizations, right? That challenge only gets compounded, right? Because they lack the resources that larger organization would have. And, a high percentage, 90+% of our manufacturers belong to that category, MSMEs, right? Now, you can see that this is an enormous burden, or if you begin to reimagine, manufacturing with and look at it through the digital lens, it suddenly begins to open up a plethora of new opportunities. And you begin to realize that size and scale is no longer a disadvantage, right? You can innovate at a pace which is much faster than what anyone has ever done. And I think the speakers before me have, illustrated that so eloquently, right? I think digital technologies are actually leveling out the playing field, and people can, all you need to do is to have an innovator's mindset, right? You need to be able to take some risk, experiment, learn through those experimentation. You don't have to be a startup to do that. All you have to have is an attitude of a startup, right? Is to take a little bit of a risk, take some chances, experiment at whatever scale you're comfortable with, but just continue that and learn from those experiences, fail fast, and all of that stuff. I'm seeing that happen across the board. Multiple industries that I get engaged with, it could be consumer facing industries, it could be industries like automotive and tire, and I'm not talking about large companies, I'm talking about, small sized MSME organizations, all the way to drug makers and pharmaceutical companies that have really been under the lens, under the spotlight in the pandemic phases. And we've seen that people who've, who had a higher level of digitization or automation, who are a lot more resilient, right? They were able to stand up their operations a lot quicker, right? They were able to also make do with much fewer people in the early phases of pandemic on the shop floors, right? Because they had the means to collaborate across distances, right? And also in terms of being able to repurpose their facilities to create products which were needed, particularly in the early stage of pandemic, right? When there was hardly any availability of things as simple as sanitizers, which we take for a given. 1 year ago, we were not, right? And a lot of production facilities had to be repurposed, right? So we are recognizing that you need that agility, right? And that agility is now being afforded to you by these digital technologies. And the manner in which you are able to now leverage data to unify your entire organization, right? Now, data, a lot of data is born in the factories, right? But that data lacks the context. But these new technologies and the convergence that we talk about is giving us a very rich context, which is enabling us to make much better decisions. So I'm now trying to relate it back to the original question you asked me as to how jobs are evolving. I see, Chris, that the jobs, leveraging this very rich context, this new information that's coming out of this huge, massive mine of data that is there coming out of manufacturing context, is giving us very rich insights. It's allowing us to model our manufacturing and industrial processes in a manner which has never been done. And that gives you enormous amount of insights on which you can innovate to your heart's content, right? So, and this creates possibilities of new kinds of jobs, right? And we can continue speaking with a number of examples, but you get the idea where I'm going. So I think the whole aspect of jobs is going to evolve simply because there's need for that innovation, which kind of just relates back to the comment that was being made, that as we make the degrees of freedom, let's put it that way, that is available to the top 2% to the remaining 90+%, right? There's an enormous amount of scope for innovation, and innovation doesn't have to happen, in the startups. That sense of startup, being there in the industry at large is what is going to help us create not just a $1 trillion digital economy, but we actually need a $1 trillion manufacturing sector to continue to power the growth of our economy at large, right? So I think that's exceedingly important, and the outcomes that you can drive by leveraging these new possibilities, is quite tantalizing. I'll just leave it at that.
No, thank you, Dilip. It reminded me of the first introduction of computers in banking industry. They were called ALPM machines, automatic ledger posting machines, and there was fear that significant number of jobs would be lost. But fast forward today, banking is completely different, and it's grown manyfold, and the services that it delivers today are vastly different from the services it delivers, and it created many jobs. I think your perspective is correct. I think if we can reimagine, if we can innovate, we can create much better jobs and create an agile manufacturing sector, especially driven by SME. Now let me come to Dr. Rishi Bhatnagar. Rishi, the question that I'm going to pose to you is about connectivity. India has done extremely well till now in providing one of the best telecom infrastructure, one of the lowest cost telecom infrastructure, and has connected billion plus people and given them access, given them opportunity to participate in this economy. But this has to now grow several fold with IoT devices coming in, with a lot more bandwidth being required. We talk about all the things that we mentioned today in terms of education, in terms of entertainment, consumption of content, in terms of automating our SME sector. The data communication requirements are going to be huge. And on top of that, we also need to worry about secure data communications. So are we, I of course see this as an opportunity, but are we ready? And do we have the wherewithal to address these issues? So if I may ask you. Rishi, you may be muted because we can't hear you.
Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much. I am from the generation where you and Vijay sir has been our mentors. So, it has been an opportunity and an honor for me to be part of the panel. I have met you all in person number of times. Sir, I give you a minute before I answer your question. Sir, we are a US-based Silicon Valley technology company. Okay, a digital company giving connectivity to machine, IoT platform, solutions, joint venture with SoftBank, joint venture with Volkswagen. In 2015, after the digital mission was announced on 1st of July, my board decided that we have to be in India. Okay. So, when you talk about the digital India giving boost to the economy, we came to India in 2016 only after seeing that the government of India has such a mission and a, thought of getting into the digital world and to enable the billion plus people how to provide service. So we came, not only gave jobs to the Indian skilled resources, created a state-of-the-art office, but also brought all the technology, what we were doing in India, in United States. Okay. So this is the another part of the economy boost when you bring the technology and start implementing in India. Sir, India gave us the opportunity for 1 billion plus people to get the services. Simultaneously, it gave us a challenge of coming to the price points where India can buy. Okay. So the main objective of our organization and the board was that if we will be in a position to succeed in India, then getting from 1 billion to 7 billion should not be a challenge, because we have already scaled. We have already got to a price point that will be able to take us to the next growth. Sir, I'm very happy that we have been able to create an ecosystem in India for IoT, from connectivity to devices to solutions. Number of market segments, market industry we have been doing. Making India as a base, sir, what we have been able to do is to start with Southeast Asia and Africa. And my next target is Latin America. So making India as a base, how am I been able to sell the same technology across the globe is what we have been able to do. Okay. So that's another example of how we have been able to boost the economy by becoming an exporter of technology from India as a base to the other part of the world. So another point which I want to focus, we were importing devices and all the sensors mostly from China and some of the Eastern Europe countries. Okay. Today, I'm getting all my devices, and I repeat, I'm getting all my devices manufactured in India. Okay. They are of the same quality and a similar kind of price points, which I have been able to achieve because of the kind of the trust the government of India has given. So it has been a very, very good journey for us. We have been able to grow ourselves in the last 5-6 years after the digital mission. And today we have, after, in 2019, sir, there was a national product development policy, the national software product policy that came. That gave us the idea of developing product in India. And last week I have launched another product in India for Indian market. Okay. That was totally for the COVID kind of things. Necessity became the mother of invention, because the problem people were facing, e-education, work from home, even the courts from home, so on and so forth. So all of these things are happening, sir. When we started, it was only 2G, okay, and getting into the remote locations was getting more and more difficult. But slowly, the connectivity position in India has significantly improved, okay. But there are lots and lots of things still required. But sir, if you notice, the BharatNet project and the other kind of projects which the government of India took and started, and now this broadband connectivity till Gram Panchayat, and now Wi-Fi till village, all those kind of things are really helping. So during the COVID time, the amount of data utilization in the rural India was much more than the urban area. That was, to me, is one of the proof that digital India worked, or the connectivity is available in the rural area. So the connectivity position somehow, in many areas, ups and downs keeps on happening, and there's a need for a significant improvement in the connectivity availability. But with the satellite and Wi-Fi till in the village area, both of these things will help. Now the satellite connectivity is also getting available, and people are currently working also on some other new connectivity technologies like LoRa and Sigfox, which are unlicensed bandwidth. And for many kind of solutions in the IoT and digital space, such kind of bandwidth availability and such kind of solution help in reducing the cost. Sir, for an IoT solution to succeed and scale, the cost is also a very, very important factor. And going for unlicensed frequencies and getting into that level of data transfer really help us in seeing how can we reduce the cost. So coming to your point on the security side, sir, it has always been a challenge, and with device, network, and IT, all three joining their hands together, the threat has become much more. Okay, so while we were having a lot of testing done on the device level testing or a network level testing or an IT service testing, a combination of all three of them together is still not available. Sir, I am also part of the IET Future Tech panel, and there we have been able to work on creating a framework on how, when you combine all these three things together, an IT industry with the connectivity industry and the manufacturing industry together, and a solution working as a whole, how can you work? And we have given these kind of suggestions of how can we create this security testing and vulnerable penetration testing when all three things are working together, and see how can we reduce. But sir, I have to admit this threat is there, and there is a need for an operations center to ensuring that they are monitoring continuously on the security threats, and in case such kind of threat happens, what kind of solution and immediate actions they have to take. So there is a sir, the Data Protection Act or the Data Attraction regulatory body which was supposed to come is still being awaited, and I really in this forum I request if the government can complete that work, that will really help to give a direction to the industry. This is the way going forward. Okay, that's all from my side, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishi. We will have a quick round. All of us in some sense are, if I may say so, techies, and we understand this technology. We've been, I think we have become digital natives, from digital immigrants in some sense. So from Vijay to Rishi, right? Digital immigrants to digital native. So my question and I'll start with Vijay, to the listener, the viewer now, how can you reassure that when Digital India really happens, that it is going to improve the lives of ordinary Indian, and they are going to benefit from that? So Vijay, and the same question to everybody, but try and give your own perspective in this regard, and make it very brief because we have very little time. So Vijay, please.
Okay, I think mine will be the simpler to say. If we can educate the whole India and arm them with the skills, then I think livelihoods will be better quality livelihoods will be there. In the digital economy, actually the generalist jobs will go away. We were talking about jobs of next 5 years, what will that be? And therefore specialist jobs will increase. I think digital technology used for education will help us bring specialized education to the doorstep of everyone and create a level playing field for all. And then once that happens, I think people will be able to improve the quality of their lives with the advanced skills that they have gained. And newer jobs will open, which will open newer livelihoods. So according to me, just the fact that we will be able to reach education and advanced and up-to-date current education to all itself will, I think, increase the level of livelihoods and capability, earning capability for each.
Thank you, Vijay. Rajan, your perspective on this?
So to me, I think digital definitely is a mechanism which democratizes access. I think it is truly empowering. It is enabling, and we see that in every activity of daily life. And I think to the common Indian, be it education, be it jobs, be it moving in a vehicle, mobility, or any aspect. But I think the most important one is the financial inclusion piece, which I think digital has enabled. I think the ability and the transparency and the effortless mechanism by way of which financial security, which leads to a lot of spending and receipt can actually happen through digital, has probably been one of the most empowering changes so far. But it will definitely continue to shape the future in many, many ways. As I mentioned, is Society 5.0 will be based on digital.
Thank you. Dilip, your perspective on the same question. What can ordinary Indian look forward to?
Sure. Chris, I'll just build on the comment I was making earlier. I see digital technologies as a great leveler of the playing field. 20 years ago, when organizations were beginning to acquire, systems like ERPs and other such sophisticated business tools, it was the domain of the very large organizations and such. That's not the case today at all. And I say this in the context of large amount of Indian manufacturers being MSME companies. Today, you could have access to advanced analytics. You could have access to AR, VR, XR technologies, etc., on a software as a subscription basis. So technology is no longer a limiting factor. You have access to that today, as the big boys have. So what is the limiting factor then? The limiting factor is, your willingness to innovate, your willingness to take risk and such. So you can actually come in and disrupt the game of the big boys. And that's what I call as the ability of technology to create the level playing field, which should be a great good news for the Indian manufacturing sectors. And I think it could create a tipping point moment for us.
Thank you. And Rishi, to you, the same question.
The largest enterprise of a country called government has decided to serve their citizens. And when they've decided to serve 1.3 billion people, the only way they can do is through digital technologies. There's no other way. So for me, to provide, the common Indians can expect, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, anything which they require, will be available to them in the as per digital, and this is something which anybody can expect. The only point which I like to say, the iPhone became so popular because it was so user friendly. Nobody have to be a learner, a digitalist or a digital technologist or a skilled person to work on a mobile phone now. Okay. Similar fashion, sir, how can we create a user friendly interfaces for our digital technology is something which will help the common Indian citizens to utilize these services available. And that's what, sir, my last point of today is that, if we can make it more user friendly, then anybody can use it. That's what our priority has to be. Else, people are going to get all services using these digital technologies. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. On that optimistic and positive note, there is confidence in the panel about achieving the $1 trillion economy through digital technologies. There's confidence in India being competitive. There's confidence that this technology is going to help every Indian, as has been demonstrated during COVID times. So with that, let me hand it back to the organizers for the next panel. Thank you all very much, and good afternoon again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chairman.
So that was the live coverage we were getting for you, a webinar which was organized by the CII, that is Confederation of Indian Industry, and that focused on Digital India, a boost to economy. And the panelists talk how promising the country is when we talk of digitalization and the confidence in Digital India, which was put forth not only by the investors here in the country, but also investors abroad. So that was it in this edition of Midday Prime. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.